Silence! One more word out of your filth-spewing mouth, boy, and I will have you shackled and gagged before the bailiff can blink. Judge Nolan Ravenswood screamed, his face a mask of purple rage, veins bulging against his stiff collar. The young man in the oversized hoodie didn't flinch. He stood in the center of the courtroom aisle, hands in his pockets, staring dead at the bench. "I'm just asking for the court record to reflect your tone, Your Honor," the boy said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "My tone? You think you have rights here? You are nothing but street trash clogging my docket." Ravenswood sneered, leaning over the mahogany railing. "Bailiff! Seize him! Let's teach this hoodlum a lesson about American justice." The air in courtroom 4B was always 5 degrees too cold, a deliberate architectural choice by the Honorable Judge Nolan Ravenswood. He believed the chill kept the rabble awake and the lawyers on edge. To him, this room wasn't just a function of the state. It was his cathedral, and he was the vengeful deity seated upon the high altar. Ravenswood adjusted his silk robes, his eyes scanning the docket with the weary disdain of a man forced to sift through garbage. He was 60 years old, a man of sharp angles and silver hair that looked as if it had been sculpted from steel wool. He had served on the bench for 20 years, and in that time he had cultivated a reputation as the Hammer of the South. He didn't rehabilitate, he incarcerated. "Next case," he droned, his voice rasping like dry leaves over concrete. "The state of Georgia versus Cassius Vale," called out the clerk, a nervous woman who flinched every time Ravenswood shifted in his chair. "Charges: grand larceny, destruction of public property, and resisting arrest." Ravenswood looked over his spectacles. In the defendant's chair sat Cassius Vale. The boy was 17, though he looked 14. He was thin, his wrists barely thick enough to keep the handcuffs from sliding off. He wore an orange jumpsuit that swallowed his frame, and his eyes were wide, darting around the room like a trapped bird. Standing next to Cassius was a public defender who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. And on the other side, looking predatory and pristine in a tailored crimson suit, was Esmeralda Knox. Esmeralda was the district attorney's pit bull. She didn't lose. She didn't plea bargain unless it was a trap. She and Ravenswood had a rhythm, a silent dance where she lobbed the softballs and he smashed them out of the park with maximum sentencing guidelines. "Ms. Knox," Ravenswood said, a hint of a smile touching his thin lips. "Do proceed. Tell me why this child is wasting my Tuesday morning." Esmeralda stood, smoothing her skirt. She walked toward the jury box, though there was no jury today. This was a pre-trial hearing, a motion to suppress evidence that everyone knew Ravenswood would deny. "Your Honor," Esmeralda began, her voice smooth as velvet but sharp as glass. "The defendant, Mr. Vale, was apprehended 3 blocks from the scene of the crime. The historic Savannah Mint was broken into, and a collection of rare Civil War-era coins was stolen. Mr. Vale was found with a backpack. While the coins were not in the backpack at the time of arrest, witness testimony places a young black male in a dark hoodie fleeing the scene." Ravenswood snorted, a sound of derisive laughter. "A hoodie. Well, that narrows it down to half the city, doesn't it? But I assume the arresting officers found something incriminating?" "They found a crowbar, Your Honor," Esmeralda lied. Or rather, she stretched the truth. It was a tire iron found in a nearby dumpster. Not on Cassius's person, but the police report had been conveniently vague. Cassius jumped up, his chains rattling. "That wasn't mine. I was walking home from the library. I didn't have no crowbar." Wham! Ravenswood's gavel struck the sound block with force enough to rattle the water pitcher. "You speak when spoken to, defendant!" Ravenswood roared. "Sit down before I add contempt to your list of failures." Cassius slumped back, tears welling in his eyes. In the gallery behind him, a woman wept softly. It was Nyla Parker, Cassius's mother. She wore her Sunday best, a modest floral dress that had seen better days, clutching a worn Bible. She looked at the judge with pleading eyes, but Ravenswood didn't see people like Nyla. He saw obstacles. "Your Honor," the public defender squeaked. "My client is an honor roll student. He has a scholarship pending to Georgia Tech." The description of the suspect was vague at best. Dark hoodie is not probable cause for the way he was tackled and beaten. Ravenswood waved a hand dismissively. "Spare me the sob story, counselor. Scholarship pending usually means hasn't been caught yet." The police officer's affidavit states the boy resisted. That shows a consciousness of guilt. Innocent boys don't run. "He didn't run!" Nyla cried out from the gallery, unable to hold it in. "He was scared. They pulled guns on him." Ravenswood's eyes snapped to the gallery. They were cold, dead things. "Bailiff, remove that woman. If she opens her mouth again, hold her in a cell until I decide she's learned respect." "No, please," Cassius begged. "Mom, just be quiet, please." As the bailiff, a burly man with a thick neck, began to move toward Nyla, the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a slow, deliberate creak. A silhouette stood in the doorway. The figure didn't rush. He walked into the courtroom with a swagger that felt entirely out of place in this mausoleum of misery. He was young, perhaps mid-20s, black, with dreadlocks tied back loosely. He wore ripped black jeans, dirty Timberland boots, and an oversized gray hoodie with the hood pulled up, casting his face in shadow. He looked like every stereotype Ravenswood despised. He looked like a target. The silence in the courtroom was heavy, suffocating. Every eye turned to the newcomer. He walked right down the center aisle, his boots thudding rhythmically against the floor. He didn't stop at the gallery rail. He pushed through the swinging gate and walked right into the well of the court, the sacred space reserved for attorneys and officers of the court. Ravenswood watched him, paralyzed for a moment by the sheer audacity. The boy looked like he had just walked off a street corner in the worst part of town. "Stop right there," Ravenswood finally barked, finding his voice. "Who do you think you are? The gallery is back there. This area is for officers of the court." The young man stopped. He looked at Esmeralda Knox, who was eyeing him with a mixture of disgust and amusement. He looked at the trembling public defender. Then he looked up at Ravenswood. "I'm here for him," the stranger said, pointing a long finger at Cassius. His voice was low, laced with a thick, exaggerated street vernacular. "I heard y'all was railroading my little cousin here. Thought I'd come see the show." Esmeralda laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Your Honor, is this a joke? Bailiff, remove this intruder." "Hold on, Ms. Knox," Ravenswood said, a cruel glint entering his eye. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. He loved moments like this. It was an opportunity to confirm his worldview. "Let the boy speak. It's been a dull morning." Ravenswood looked down at the stranger. "You're here for him? In what capacity? Are you his gang leader? His drug supplier?" The stranger shrugged, keeping his hands in his hoodie pocket. "Nah, nothing like that, Judge. I'm just an interested party. Name's Evander Blackwell." "Well, Mr. Blackwell," Ravenswood said, savoring the mockery in his own tone, "unless you have a law degree hidden in those oversized pants, you have no standing here. Turn around and walk out or join Mr. Vale in a cell." Evander tilted his head. He took a few steps closer to the defense table, ignoring the bailiff who was inching toward him. "Actually, Your Honor, I was hoping to help with the defense. See, this lawyer here," he pointed at the public defender. "He looked like he about to pass out, and my cousin Cassius needs someone who speaks his language, someone who knows the streets." The court reporter stopped typing, her mouth agape. Ravenswood chuckled, and then the chuckle grew into a full-blown laugh. "You want to defend him? You? Look at you. You can barely dress yourself, let alone articulate a legal argument. This is a court of law, boy, not a rap battle." I watch a lot of TV, Evander said, keeping his face neutral, though his eyes burned with a hidden intensity. I know about rights, Miranda rights, habeas corpus, all that. Esmeralda stepped forward, shaking her head. Your Honor, this is absurd. He's making a mockery of your courtroom. No, Ms. Knox, Ravenswood corrected her, a wicked grin spreading across his face. He is making a mockery of himself, and I want to see it. Ravenswood had an idea. It was cruel, unethical, and entirely within his character. He wanted to humiliate this boy. He wanted to show everyone in the gallery, especially the weeping mother, that their people were incompetent, uneducated, and unfit for civilized society. He would let this boy try to defend Cassius, and then he would crush him, legally and spiritually. Tell me, Mr. Blackwell, Ravenswood said, are you familiar with the concept of pro-hack vice? Evander scratched his chin, feigning confusion. Pro-hack. What? Nah, man, I don't know Latin. Of course you don't, Ravenswood sneered. It means for this occasion. It allows a lawyer from another jurisdiction to practice here, but you aren't a lawyer, are you? I ain't got no fancy paper on my wall, if that's what you mean, Evander replied. Perfect, Ravenswood declared. He looked at the court reporter. Let the record show that the defendant, Mr. Vale, has requested to dismiss his public defender and proceed pro se with the assistance of his friend, Mr. Blackwell. I am granting this request. Your Honor, the public defender protested. You can't do that. The boy is a minor. He needs competent counsel. Are you suggesting you are competent? Ravenswood snapped. Sit down or leave. Mr. Vale, do you agree to this? Cassius looked at Evander. He didn't know this man. He had never seen him before in his life. But when Evander looked at him, he lowered his hood just an inch. Cassius saw something in Evander's eyes, a fierce, burning intelligence that didn't match the slouch or the slang. Evander gave a microscopic nod. I trust him, Cassius whispered. Then it is settled. Ravenswood banged his gavel. Mr. Blackwell, the floor is yours. Ms. Knox has a motion to suppress evidence. She claims the arrest was lawful. You have 5 minutes to argue why I shouldn't lock your cousin away for the next 10 years. Entertain me. Ravenswood sat back, crossing his arms. He expected mumbling. He expected shouting. He expected ignorance. He had no idea that the shark was not on the bench. The shark was standing in the well wearing a hoodie. Evander moved to the defense table. He didn't sit. He leaned against it, crossing his ankles, looking entirely too comfortable. He picked up the police report that the public defender had left behind. He flipped through it, licking his thumb to turn the page. A gesture that made Esmeralda curl her lip in disgust. So, Evander said, looking at the paper, Officer Miller says he saw a black male running. That's it? That is the simplified version for your benefit, Esmeralda said, not bothering to stand up to address him. The officer identified the suspect based on height, build, and proximity to the crime scene. Standard procedure. Standard, Evander repeated. He looked up at the judge. Hey, Judge, you know about the Brady rule? Ravenswood blinked. It was the first time the boy had used a legal term correctly, though his pronunciation was intentionally thick. I am aware of Brady v. Maryland, yes. It requires the prosecution to turn over exculpatory evidence. What of it? Do you think Ms. Knox is hiding something? Maybe, Evander said. But I was thinking more about Terry. Terry? Ravenswood frowned. Terry v. Ohio, Evander said, his voice tightening slightly. Stop and frisk. Reasonable suspicion. See? Officer Miller says he stopped Cassius 'cause he looked suspicious. But simply walking in a high-crime area ain't enough for reasonable suspicion. That's Illinois versus Wardlow. The room went silent. The air conditioning hummed, sounding like a jet engine in the sudden quiet. Ravenswood sat up straighter. You... no case citations? Evander shrugged, reverting to his act. I told you, Judge. I watch a lot of TV. Law and order is my jam. Ravenswood narrowed his eyes. He felt a flicker of unease, but he squashed it. The boy was a parrot, repeating things he'd heard without understanding the nuance. Citing a case name does not make a legal argument, Mr. Blackwell. Officer Miller had more than just walking. He saw the defendant running from the direction of the alarm. Did he? Evander asked. He turned to Esmeralda. Hey, Ms. Lady, you got the body cam footage? Esmeralda scoffed. We are not required to play body cam footage at a preliminary hearing. The officer's sworn affidavit is sufficient. Usually, yeah, Evander said. He walked toward the prosecutor's table. But see, I happen to know that the Savannah PD got those new Axon Body 3 cameras. They got a feature called Recall. Records 30 seconds of video before the officer hits the record button. Audio too, sometimes. Evander turned back to Ravenswood. If the officer saw Cassius running, it'd be on the buffer. But if the video shows Cassius just walking and listening to music until Miller tackled him, well then the stop is illegal. Fruit of the poisonous tree. Wong Sun Veer, United States. Ravenswood's grip on his gavel tightened. This was impossible. This street thug was citing Fourth Amendment jurisprudence with the casual ease of a tenured professor. You are fishing, Mr. Blackwell, Ravenswood growled. We are not here to conduct discovery. We are here to determine probable cause. And you can't have probable cause based on a lie, Evander shot back. The slang slipped away for a split second, his voice becoming crisp, authoritative. Then he caught himself. I mean, you know, if the cop is lying, then the whole thing is bogus, right? Esmeralda stood up, angry now. Your Honor, I object. He is accusing a decorated officer of perjury with zero evidence. I move to strike his comments and end this charade. Ravenswood looked at Evander. He saw the challenge in the boy's eyes. If he shut him down now, he'd look like he was protecting the cop. But if he let him continue, he risked losing control of his courtroom. But Ravenswood's arrogance was his Achilles heel. He believed he could outsmart anyone, especially someone who looked like Evander. Overruled, Ravenswood said, shocking Esmeralda. I want to see where this goes. Mr. Blackwell, are you suggesting you have evidence that contradicts the affidavit? I'm saying, Evander said, walking back to the center of the room, that if we don't watch that video, you're gonna sentence an innocent kid based on a hunch. And I know you, Judge Ravenswood. I read about you in the paper. You're a strict man, a law and order man. Surely you care about the integrity of the law? It was a challenge wrapped in a compliment, a masterstroke. Bailiff, Ravenswood barked. Instruct the prosecutor to pull up the digital file for the body cam. Let's resolve this now so I can send Mr. Vale to juvenile detention and Mr. Blackwell back to whatever gutter he crawled out of. Esmeralda fumed, typing furiously on her laptop. She connected it to the large monitors in the courtroom. This is highly irregular, she muttered. Play it, Ravenswood commanded. The screen flickered to life. The shaky, grainy footage of a police officer running. It was dark. The timestamp read 9:42 p.m. See? Esmeralda said. He's running. Wait, Evander said. Look at the timestamp. The alarm at the Mint went off at 9:45 p.m. This video is from 3 minutes before the crime happened. The courtroom gasped. Officer Miller says he responded to the alarm, Evander said, pointing at the screen. But he was chasing Cassius before the alarm even tripped. Which means he wasn't chasing a suspect. He was chasing a black kid in a hoodie because he felt like it. Ravenswood stared at the screen. His face turned a shade of pale gray. And look at Cassius, Evander continued. Freeze it there. Esmeralda froze the video. In the blurry corner, Cassius wasn't running away. He was walking, headphones on, looking down at a book in his hands. He turned his head as the officer sprinted at him. The look on his face wasn't guilt. It was sheer terror. No crowbar, Evander noted. No bag of coins, just a kid and a book. Introduction to Quantum Mechanics. Evander turned to the judge. He dropped the street accent entirely. He stood up to his full height, his posture shifting from a slouch to the rigid, commanding stance of a seasoned litigator. "Your Honor," Evander said, his voice deep and resonant, echoing off the walls. "The stop was pretextual. The affidavit is perjured. There is no probable cause. Under the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution and the precedent set in Mapp v. Ohio, any evidence seized, including the alleged tire iron found later, is inadmissible. You must dismiss this case immediately." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb having gone off, with the dust just beginning to settle. Ravenswood looked at the boy in the hoodie. He realized with a sinking feeling in his gut that he had walked into a trap. But he wasn't ready to yield, not to him. "You have a sharp tongue, boy," Ravenswood hissed. "But catching a typo in a police report doesn't make you a lawyer, and it certainly doesn't make this boy innocent." "It makes him free," Evander retorted. "Unless you plan to suspend the Constitution today." Ravenswood slammed his gavel down, the sound cracking like a whip. "Recess! I will review the footage in chambers. Everyone clear the court. Now!" As the courtroom erupted into chaos, Evander didn't move. He just stared at the judge, a small, cold smile playing on his lips. The war had just begun. The recess was not a break. It was a retreat for the wounded to bandage their egos and sharpen their knives. Esmeralda Knox paced the length of the district attorney's conference room, her heels clicking a staccato rhythm of pure agitation. The air in the room smelled of stale coffee and desperation. She had prosecuted 300 cases in her career. She had won 298 of them. She did not lose to men in hoodies. "Who is he?" she demanded, spinning to face her paralegal, a young man named Timothy, whose primary job description seemed to be absorbing Esmeralda's stress. Timothy was hunched over a laptop, sweat beading on his upper lip. "I'm trying, Ms. Knox, but it's weird. I ran Evander Blackwell through the NCIC database. I got a hit for a guy in Atlanta with a record for petty theft and truancy, but that guy is currently serving time in DeKalb County. Our guy, he's a ghost." "He's not a ghost, Timothy. He's a nuisance," Esmeralda snapped. "He cited Wong's son. He knew about the Axon Body 3 buffer feature. That isn't law and order trivia, that is specific technical knowledge. Is he a disbarred lawyer? A paralegal fired for embezzlement?" "I'm running a face recognition scan against the state bar directory now," Timothy said. "But the hoodie, the shadows, it's hard to get a lock." Esmeralda walked to the window, looking out at the Savannah skyline. The live oaks draped in Spanish moss usually calmed her, but today they looked like tangled webs. She thought of Judge Ravenswood. He would be in his chambers, likely pouring a glass of the expensive scotch he kept behind Black's Law Dictionary. He would be furious. And a furious Ravenswood was a dangerous thing, not just for the defense, but for the prosecution if they failed to deliver his pound of flesh. In the holding cell beneath the courthouse, the atmosphere was vastly different. Cassius Vale sat on the metal bench, his hands still shaking. Nyla, his mother, had been allowed a brief visit, a rare mercy granted by a bailiff who secretly despised Ravenswood. She held Cassius's hands through the bars, weeping silently. Evander stood in the corner, leaning against the cinder block wall. The thug persona had slipped, just a fraction. His posture was straighter, his eyes less guarded. "You really think that video is going to make him let me go?" Cassius asked, his voice small. Evander sighed, running a hand over his dreadlocks. "In a fair court?" "Yes. Immediate dismissal." "But this isn't a fair court, Cass. This is Ravenswood's kingdom. He's back there right now figuring out a way to twist the law into a noose." "Then what do we do?" Nyla asked, looking up at Evander with a mix of awe and fear. "Who are you, really? You talk like the professors at the university where I clean floors." Evander smiled, a genuine, warm expression that transformed his face. I'm just a man who reads a lot, Mrs. Parker. Let's leave it at that for now. But you need to prepare yourselves. When we go back up there, Ravenswood is going to deny the motion. What? Cassius cried. But the video! The cop lied! He'll use the good faith exception, Evander predicted, his voice turning clinical. He'll say that even if the stop was premature, the officer believed he was acting on credible intelligence regarding the alarm. He'll separate the initial stop from the discovery of the weapon in the dumpster. He will force this to trial. Today. Today? Nyla gasped. But we aren't ready. He wants to catch us off balance, Evander said. He stepped forward and gripped the bars, looking Cassius dead in the eye. But he's the one who's not ready. He thinks I'm a street lawyer with a few lucky tricks. He doesn't know I've memorized every ruling he's written for the last 20 years. I know how he thinks. I know his prejudices, and I'm going to use them to break him. The heavy steel door clanged open. The bailiff, looking apologetic, stepped in. Time's up. Judge is back on the bench. He's in a mood. Evander pulled his hood back up, the shadow falling over his face. The transformation was instant. The confident legal strategist vanished. The slouching, street-smart hustler returned. Let's go to work, Evander drawled. Evander's prediction was terrifyingly accurate. Motion to suppress is denied, Ravenswood declared the moment his robe hit the chair. He didn't even look at the defense table. He stared at the ceiling, bored. On what grounds? Evander asked, remaining seated. You saw the tape. Officer Miller was chasing a ghost before the crime even happened. Stand when you address me, Ravenswood snapped. And the grounds are United States versus Leon. The officer acted in good faith reliance on the dispatch protocols, regardless of the timing discrepancy, which I find to be a technical glitch in the camera's internal clock. A glitch? Evander laughed, a dry, humorless sound. That's convenient. So the camera time traveling now? Another outburst and you will be in contempt, Ravenswood warned, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. We are moving immediately to jury selection. The state has indicated they are ready. Are you ready, Mr. Blackwell? Or would you like to surrender now and save us the taxpayers' money? Oh, we ready, Evander said. Born ready. The process of voir dire, jury selection, began. In a county like this, the jury pool was a mixed bag. Retirees, blue-collar workers, a few tired teachers. Ravenswood and Esmeralda moved with practiced efficiency. Esmeralda asked questions that seemed harmless but were designed to weed out anyone with empathy. She struck a young social worker. She struck a man who worked for a non-profit. Then came the racial purging. Every time a black juror came up for questioning, Esmeralda found a reason to dismiss them. Conflict of interest. Previous negative experience with law enforcement. Inability to remain impartial due to community ties. Ravenswood granted every strike without hesitation. Evander sat quietly, marking a yellow legal pad with a cheap Bic pen. He watched the jury box fill up with 12 people. 10 were white. 2 were elderly Hispanic women who looked terrified. Not a single black face remained. The jury is seated, Ravenswood announced, looking pleased. Swear them in. Objection, Evander called out. He stood up slowly. On what grounds? Ravenswood sighed. We have gone through the process. I'm challenging the array under Batson, Evander said. Ravenswood froze. Batson v. Kentucky was the Supreme Court case that made it illegal to use peremptory strikes to exclude jurors based solely on race. It was a serious accusation. It required the judge to demand a race-neutral reason from the prosecutor. A Batson challenge? Esmeralda stood, feigning shock. Your Honor, this is offensive. I struck those jurors based on their answers, not their race. You struck juror number 4 because he said he didn't trust cops, Evander said, looking at his notes. But juror number 7, a white man, said the exact same thing, and you kept him. Why the difference, Ms.? Knox, is it 'cause juror 4 was wearing a dashiki? Juror 7 was referring to a traffic ticket, Esmeralda sputtered. Juror 4 had a cousin in prison. And you struck juror 12 because she lived in the same neighborhood as the defendant, Evander continued, relentless. But Savannah ain't that big. Juror 3 lives 2 streets over from the Mint, and she's sitting right there. What's the distinction? Melanin? Ravenswood slammed his hand on the bench. Enough. Mr. Blackwell, you are treading on thin ice. Ms. Knox has provided race-neutral reasons. I accept them. The Batson challenge is denied. The jury stands. Evander didn't argue. He didn't yell. He simply nodded, picked up his pen, and wrote something on his pad in large block letters. Reversible error. He wasn't just trying to win the trial. He was building the appeal record. He was laying traps that Ravenswood, in his arrogance, was walking right into. Opening statements, Ravenswood barked. Esmeralda gave a textbook opening. She painted Cassius as a menace, a thug who smashed into a historic institution to steal history itself. She promised the jury that the evidence, the tire iron, the witness testimony, would be irrefutable. Then it was Evander's turn. He walked to the center of the room. He didn't use the podium. He stood in front of the jury box, uncomfortably close. He looked at each of them. Y'all ever been afraid? Evander asked. He didn't sound like a lawyer. He sounded like a storyteller. I mean real fear. Not I forgot to pay the bill fear. I mean I might die right now fear. Objection, Esmeralda said. Relevance? Overruled, Ravenswood said, surprisingly. He was curious. Cassius was afraid, Evander said, pointing to the trembling boy. He was walking home, reading a book about physics, and suddenly a man with a gun and a badge comes sprinting at him out of the dark. No lights, no siren, just a man hunting a boy. Evander paused. Ms. Knox gonna talk about coins. She gonna talk about a crowbar found in a trash can down the street. But she ain't gonna show you the fingerprints on that bar. You know why? 'Cause there ain't none. She ain't gonna show you the coins in Cassius's pocket. 'Cause there weren't none. He leaned in. This case ain't about theft. It's about a judge and a prosecutor who need to fill a quota. It's about a system that looks at a boy with a book and sees a criminal with a weapon. I ain't asking you to like Cassius. I'm asking you to look at the math. And the math don't add up. He walked back to the table and sat down. The jury shifted in their seats. For the first time, they weren't looking at Cassius with fear. They were looking at him with doubt. The prosecution's case moved fast. Esmeralda called the curator of the Mint, who wept over the broken display case. She called the officer who found the tire iron. Then, she called her star witness, Officer Miller. Miller was a large man with a buzz cut and a neck that spilled over his collar. He sat in the witness stand with the confidence of a man who knew the judge was on his team. Officer Miller, Esmeralda asked, tell us what happened. I received a silent alarm notification. Miller lied smoothly. I proceeded to the location. I saw the defendant fleeing the rear exit. I pursued. He resisted. I subdued him. And you are certain it was the defendant? 100%, Miller said, pointing at Cassius. Same height, same hoodie. Your witness, Esmeralda said, smirking. Evander stood up. He didn't take his notes. He walked up to the stand, hands in his pockets. Officer Miller, Evander said, you got 20/20 vision? Yes, Miller said. And it was dark, right? 9:45 p.m.? There were streetlights. Right, Evander nodded. You said you saw him fleeing the rear exit. Can you describe the rear exit of the Savannah Mint? Miller hesitated. It's a metal door. In the alley. A metal door, Evander repeated. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Judge, request to mark Defense Exhibit A. It's a blueprint of the Savannah Mint, obtained from the Public Records Office during lunch. Ravenswood narrowed his eyes. Proceed. Evander unfolded the large sheet. Officer, can you point to the rear exit? Miller squinted. He pointed to a spot on the back wall. See, that's the problem, Evander said, his voice dropping the slang, becoming razor-sharp. The Savannah Mint was built in 1840. The rear exit was bricked up in 1998 during the renovation to install the HVAC system. There is no rear exit, just a solid brick wall. The courtroom gasped. Esmeralda dropped her pen. So, Evander continued, stepping closer, his voice rising, if you saw him flee the rear exit, you must have X-ray vision, officer. Or maybe you saw him phase through the wall like a ghost, or maybe you're lying. I might have been mistaken about which door, Miller stammered, sweat breaking out on his forehead. Maybe it was the side door. The side door opens onto Bay Street, Evander snapped, the main tourist strip. If he ran out that way, 50 people would have seen him. Did you interview them? No. Did you check the security cameras on Bay Street? No. Because he wasn't there, Evander roared. He was 3 blocks away, minding his own business, wasn't he? Objection, Esmeralda screamed, standing up. He is badgering the witness. I am impeaching the witness, Evander shouted back, spinning to face the judge. He just perjured himself on the stand. He invented a door that doesn't exist. Ravenswood's face was purple. He saw the jury. They were whispering. The veneer of the righteous prosecution was cracking. He had to stop this. Mr. Blackwell, Ravenswood bellowed. Chambers, now, both of you. In the judge's chambers, the air was thick with the smell of old leather and fury. Ravenswood threw his robe onto the chair. What do you think you are doing? Ravenswood hissed at Evander. Defending my client, Evander said calmly. He stood differently now. The slouch was completely gone. He stood with the posture of a soldier, or perhaps an aristocrat. You are making a mockery of this court, Ravenswood spat. You tricked that officer. I caught him in a lie, Evander corrected, and you know it. You need to dismiss this case, Judge, right now, with prejudice. I will do no such thing, Ravenswood sneered. I will declare a mistrial. We will start over with a new jury, and I will have you investigated for practicing without a license. Who are you? I've asked around. The only Evander Blackwell on record is a petty thief. But you know civil procedure. You know architectural history. Who are you? Evander walked over to the bookshelf. He looked at the spines of the legal texts. He pulled one out. It was a dense volume titled The Ethics of Prosecutorial Conduct. You have a first edition, Evander noted. Nice. Answer me, Ravenswood screamed. Evander turned. He reached up and pulled the hood down. For the first time, Ravenswood saw his face clearly in the light. There was a scar running through his left eyebrow, faint but distinct. You really don't remember, do you? Evander asked softly. 10 years ago, a boy named Marcus Thorne, 12 years old. You sentenced him to juvenile detention for assaulting a police officer. The officer had broken his arm, but you said the boy's crying was resisting. Ravenswood blinked. The name meant nothing to him. He had sentenced thousands of boys. Marcus Thorne, Evander continued. He rotted in that detention center for 2 years. He learned to fight. He learned to survive. But mostly he read. He read every law book in the prison library. He got his GED. He got a scholarship. Evander tossed the book onto the judge's desk. Marcus Thorne died in that cell, Judge. That's what the system wanted. But the boy who walked out, he changed his name. He went to Harvard Law, graduated top of his class, summa cum laude. Ravenswood's jaw dropped. Harvard? You? I go by Evander Blackwell now, the young man said, his voice cold as ice. But if you check the Harvard Law Review, you might find my article on systemic judicial misconduct in the Southern Circuit. I dedicated it to you, Nolan. Evander leaned over the desk, his face inches from the terrified judge. I'm not a street thug, Judge. I'm a partner at Sterling, Vance, and Blackwell in New York City. And I didn't just come here to save Cassius. I came here to take your gavel. And I have a federal task force listening to everything happening in this room right now. Evander tapped his chest. Under the hoodie, a small red light blinked. A wire. Checkmate, Evander whispered. The silence in the judge's chambers was broken only by the hum of the air conditioner and the terrifyingly slow beat of Nolan Ravenswood's heart. He stared at the small red light blinking on Evander's chest. It looked like a sniper's scope laser, aimed directly at his career. You can't record me without my consent, Ravenswood stammered, his voice losing its thunder, replaced by the squeak of a trapped rat. This is a two-party consent state. Evander laughed, a sound devoid of mirth. He walked over to the window, looking out at the live oaks. Actually, Judge, under federal law, when investigating public corruption or civil rights violations under color of law, one-party consent applies, especially when authorized by a federal warrant. The door to the chambers burst open. It wasn't the bailiff. It was a woman in a sharp navy blazer, a badge hanging from her neck. Behind her stood 4 agents with windbreakers emblazoned with FBI. Special Agent Valentina Cruz, the woman announced, her voice steel. Judge Nolan Ravenswood, step away from the desk. Ravenswood collapsed into his leather chair. This is a misunderstanding. Agent Cruz, surely we can discuss this. I am a pillar of this community. You're a termite in the foundation of this community, Cruz retorted, stepping into the room. She looked at Evander and nodded. We got it all, Mr. Blackwell. The admission of bias, the acknowledgement of the perjured affidavit, the coercion. It's all on tape. Esmeralda Knox, who had been standing by the bookshelf looking like a statue of shock, suddenly animated. She took a step away from Ravenswood. I had no idea, she said, her voice trembling. Agent Cruz, I swear, I was just following the evidence provided by the police. I didn't know the officer was lying. I didn't know the judge was... Evander turned to her, his expression pitying. Save it, Esmeralda. We have your emails, too. The ones where you told Officer Miller to clean up his report. The ones where you joked about thinning the herd with maximum sentences. Esmeralda's face went white. She looked at Ravenswood, then at the agents. She realized there was no lifeboat. You're both under arrest, Valentina Cruz stated, pulling a pair of handcuffs from her belt, for conspiracy to deprive citizens of civil rights, obstruction of justice, and wire fraud. You can't arrest me, Ravenswood shrieked, clutching his desk. I am the law in this county. I am the hammer. Not anymore, Evander said softly. Now you're just a nail. Cruz moved in, grabbing Ravenswood's wrist. The man who had sentenced thousands to shackles now felt the cold steel against his own skin. He struggled, flailing like a child, his dignity evaporating in seconds. Wait, Evander said, raising a hand. Don't take him out the back way. Cruz paused. Protocol says justice must be seen to be done, Evander interrupted. Take him out through the courtroom. Let the people see. Cruz looked at Evander, then at the sobbing judge. A small, grim smile touched her lips. All right, through the courtroom. The courtroom was buzzing with confusion. The bailiff was trying to keep order, but the jury was restless, and the gallery was murmuring. Cassius Vale was still sitting at the defense table, his head in his hands, praying. Nyla was gripping the railing behind him so hard her knuckles were white. Suddenly, the door to the judge's chambers swung open. The room went silent. They expected the judge to storm out in his robes, gavel in hand, to deliver his wrath. Instead, they saw Nolan Ravenswood, stripped of his robe, his dress shirt wrinkled and sweat-stained. His hands were cuffed behind his back. He was being frog-marched by 2 federal agents. Behind him came Esmeralda Knox, weeping openly, also in handcuffs. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated shock. "What is this?" someone shouted from the back. Evander Blackwell stepped out last. He had removed the hoodie. He wore a crisp white t-shirt underneath, revealing the muscular build of a man who kept fit not for vanity, but for war. He walked to the center of the room, standing before the empty bench. "Ladies and gentlemen," Evander's voice boomed, projecting to the back row without a microphone. "There will be no trial today." He turned to the jury. "The United States Department of Justice has just placed Judge Nolan Ravenswood and District Attorney Esmeralda Knox under arrest for systemic corruption and civil rights violations." The jury stared, mouths agape. Juror number 3, the woman who lived near the Mint, put a hand to her mouth. "For 20 years, Evander continued, pacing the well, this man used this courtroom not as a hall of justice, but as a slaughterhouse. He took boys like Cassius, boys who were scared, boys who were poor, boys who looked like me, and he fed them to the prison system to build his reputation." Evander walked over to the defense table and put a hand on Cassius's shoulder. "But today, the hammer is broken." Evander looked at the court clerk, a terrified woman who didn't know what to do. "Madam Clerk, the federal agents have seized the docket. All charges against Cassius Vale are hereby dismissed with prejudice due to prosecutorial misconduct and malicious prosecution." "Dismissed?" Cassius whispered, looking up. "For real?" "For real, kid," Evander smiled. "You're free." Nyla screamed, a sound of joy so pure it pierced the heart of everyone in the room. She vaulted the railing and wrapped her son in a crushing hug. The gallery erupted. Strangers were hugging each other. The bailiff, the one who hated Ravenswood, was grinning, pretending to look busy while doing absolutely nothing to stop the celebration. Ravenswood, halfway down the aisle, twisted his head back. His eyes met Evander's. There was no defiance left in them, only fear, a deep, bottomless fear of the cage he had built for so many others. "I remember you now," Ravenswood rasped, his voice barely audible over the cheering. "Marcus Thorne." Evander nodded slowly. "Marcus Thorne is dead, Nolan. I'm the ghost that came back to haunt you." Agent Cruz shoved Ravenswood forward. "Move it, Your Honor." As the doors swung shut behind the disgraced judge, the courtroom felt different. The chill was gone. The oppressive weight that had hung over the room for 2 decades had lifted. Evander looked at the empty bench. He walked up the steps, just for a moment. He ran his hand along the mahogany railing. He didn't sit in the chair. He just stood there, looking out at the scene of liberation. He had spent 10 years imagining this moment. He thought it would feel like vengeance, but looking at Neela crying tears of joy, looking at Cassius's hopeful face, it didn't feel like vengeance. It felt like balance. The steps of the courthouse were bathed in the golden light of the late afternoon sun. It was a stark contrast to the gloom inside. News vans were already pulling up, alerted by the federal raid. Reporters were shouting questions, but Evander guided Cassius and Nyla through the throng to a quiet spot near the fountain. "I don't know how to thank you," Nyla said, wiping her eyes with a tissue. "I don't have money. I don't have much of anything." "You have a son who reads quantum mechanics for fun," Evander said, smiling at Cassius. "That's wealth, Mrs. Parker. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Cassius looked at his shoes. I was really scared, Mr. Blackwell. When that cop grabbed me, I thought my life was over. I thought about what happened to you, to Marcus." Evander knelt so he was eye level with the teenager. "Listen to me, Cass. Fear is natural, but don't let it turn into hate. Ravenswood hated. That's why he lost. You? You've got a brain that can unlock the universe. Use it." Evander reached into his back pocket and pulled out a business card. It was heavy, cream-colored stock with gold lettering. Sterling, Vance, and Blackwell. "I made a call to the Dean of Admissions at Georgia Tech," Evander said. He's an old friend of my senior partner. They're going to review your application again. And this time, they're going to see the real you, not the police report. Cassius took the card, his hands trembling. You did that for me? Us geniuses gotta stick together, Evander winked. Are you staying? Nyla asked. Savannah needs someone like you, a real judge. Evander looked at the courthouse. He saw the FBI agents carrying boxes of files out to their vans. He saw the sign that read, Chatham County Courthouse. My life is in New York, Evander said. But I think my firm is going to open a satellite office here. Pro bono division. I might have to come down a few times a month to check on things. He looked at Nyla. And to make sure the next judge knows that someone is watching. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. Valentina Cruz rolled down the window. Ready to go, counselor? She asked. We have a deposition in D.C. tomorrow regarding the federal indictment. Evander stood up. He adjusted his T-shirt, pulled his sunglasses from his collar, and put them on. He looked like a rock star, a warrior, and a lawyer all rolled into one. Go be great, Cassius, Evander said, offering a fist bump. I will, Cassius promised, bumping his fist against Evander's. I won't let you down. Evander walked to the SUV. He paused with his hand on the door handle and looked back at the courthouse one last time. He imagined 12-year-old Marcus Thorne walking out of those doors in handcuffs, crying, feeling alone in the universe. He mentally put a hand on that little boy's shoulder. It's okay, he told his past self. We got him. Evander slid into the car. As the SUV drove away, fading into the Savannah traffic, Cassius Vale stood on the sidewalk, clutching the business card like a shield. He looked at the courthouse, then he looked at the sky. For the first time in a long time, the horizon looked limitless. Justice is often depicted as a blind woman holding scales, but in reality, justice has eyes. It sees color, it sees class, and sometimes it sees easy targets. The story of Cassius Vale and Nolan Ravenswood is a reminder that authority without accountability is tyranny. It took a genius in a hoodie to dismantle a tyrant in a robe, proving that intellect and courage are the ultimate equalizers. The gavel doesn't decide the truth, it only punctuates it. True justice lives in the persistence of those who refuse to be silenced by power. Call to action. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Did you see the twist coming with Evander's identity? Let me know in the comments below. What would you have done if you were in that courtroom? Share this video with your friends if you believe the system needs more heroes like Evander Blackwell. Until next time, stay sharp, stay safe, and never judge a book by its cover. Peace.